Information Management Systems, the case of Antigua and Barbuda. I'm going to share my screen here. So yeah, thank you for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Heather Jacobs. I'm the Knowledge and Research Specialist at the CTCN. And we'll begin today's webinar with a brief introduction on the work of the CTCN, and then we will move on to introducing our main speakers for the day. So the United Nations Climate Technology Center and Network is part of the UNFCCC technology mechanism. We are actually the implementation arm of the mechanism alongside a policy arm, which is the Technology Executive Committee. And our mandate is to promote the accelerated development and transfer of climate technologies at the request of developing countries for energy efficient, low carbon, and climate resilient development. Before we delve deeper into that, we just want to touch briefly on the Paris Agreement, and what we usually hear discussed with regard to the Paris Agreement is about nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. The Paris Agreement requires each party to prepare nationally determined contributions, and these are basically climate action plans on how countries plan on cutting emissions and adapting to climate impacts, and they're required to establish these and update them every 5 years. And sometimes countries do need assistance in implementing their commitments, and this is where technology and the CTCN can come in. We don't normally hear about how technology transfer is discussed in the Paris Agreement, but it is in Articles 4.5 and 4.7, talk about how developed countries should take all practicable actions to help facilitate technology transfer to parties, and how the effective implementation of countries' implementation of their NDCs is dependent on this technology transfer. So what are we talking about when we refer to technology? Well, for climate technologies, they are explicitly focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and addressing the impacts of global warming. And basically, they can be any piece of equipment, technique, practical knowledge, or skills for performing a particular activity that can be used to tackle or adapt to climate change. And so this includes anything from hardware, which is our physical tools, what people normally think of when they think about technology, software, which are processes, knowledge, and skills needed to install and manage technologies, orgware, which are the institutional mechanisms to support the acquisition and management of technologies, and these can all be applied for both mitigation, adaptation, and cross-cutting sectors. So the governance structure of this Climate Technology Center is as follows. You can see here we have a secretariat that is hosted in Copenhagen, co-managed and hosted by the United Nations Environment Program and UNIDO, the United Nations Environmental Industrial Development Organization. We are supported by a global network of 13 consortium partners, 710 network members, and 161 national focal points, referred to as National Designated Entities, or NDEs. And these are selected by each country to coordinate and submit technical assistance requests to the CTCN. We have 3 service areas. We do provide the technical assistance to developing countries, knowledge sharing, and then networking collaborations, including linking of climate technology projects with financing opportunities. And we do this for both mitigation and adaptation across a range of sectors. And going back a little bit more on the network, since the CTCN started its operations in 2014, we have grown our network to 710 members globally. And membership is free, and there are many benefits for members, including commercial opportunities, access to bid on competitive contracting opportunities to deliver technical assistance, increased visibility. It broadens companies' their reach to engage in new projects and to participate in events and on CTCN's communication channels. And it provides additional opportunities to connect with other network members and national decision makers and thought leaders. And this provides additional partnership opportunities. So a lot of benefits there to being part of the network. Here we can see the distribution of network members by their institution type and sectoral areas of expertise. So a bit over 50% are private sector organizations, followed by research and academic institutions, as well as non-governmental organizations and not-for-profit organizations. Here we can see we have expertise across an array of sectors, a lot of expertise in renewable energy and energy efficiency, but across all sectors here as well. And in terms of technical assistance, the process works something like this. The requesting organization in the country prepares the request and contacts the NDE. The NDE confirms the compliance of the request with national priorities and then submits it to the CTCN, who then forms a team of experts to develop an assistance plan, and then eventually ends up selecting the organization that will implement the technical assistance. And this is provided free of charge with the value of up to $250,000 for a country. And again, can be provided at local, national, or regional levels and to any type of entity and across a broad range of technologies. We've had 360 requests since 2014 from 107 countries. And here we can see the breakdown. 47% of these have been for mitigation, 30% for adaptation and mitigation, and 23% for adaptation. Though this is kind of shifting right now. We're receiving more requests for adaptation recently. The geographical breakdown is that 45% have been from Africa, 31% from Asia Pacific, and 22% from Latin America. And then just over a quarter have been from least developed countries, or LDCs, 11% from small island developing states, and 63% from other developing countries. And the requests by sector for adaptation have been mainly concentrated in water, agriculture, and forestry, coastal zones, and early warning and environmental assessment. And for mitigation, largely in energy efficiency and renewable energy, and then also for waste management and transport have dominated for mitigation. And so at the CTCN, our niche seems to be that we support the enabling environment or foster the improvement of an enabling environment in each country to accelerate the uptake of technologies. So this means we're focused on providing decision-making tools and information provision, assessing feasibility of technology options and technology identification and prioritization, and developing sectoral roadmaps and strategies and things like this, also targeting law and policy and regulatory frameworks. And this really supports the development of an enabling environment to increase the uptake of technology. And lastly, just wanted to touch on the barriers that we're trying to overcome with technologies. They can basically be divided into these three categories: technological, financial, and institutional. So technology, obviously, there might be a limited ability to assess technology options, a lack of knowledge, a lack of qualified personnel, or for financial, lack of access to finance or commercial viability, or lack of financial instruments. And then institutional, a lack of or uncertain government policies, lack of infrastructure, lack of consumer acceptance. And so these are some of the things we're trying to overcome with technology transfer. And so today we have our three distinguished speakers, Mr. David Oswald, founder and president of DE Design and Environment, and also part of the associate faculty at Royal Roads University. Dr. Eva Maxim, Deputy Director of Mona Geoinformatics Institute at University of the West Indies, and Mr. Jason Williams, the Data Manager at the Department of Sustainable Development of the Government of Antigua and Barbuda. And I hand it over to you now. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much, Heather. I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay, and I believe you can all see my screen now. All right, everybody see my screen? We're good? Well, everybody, thank you very much for taking the time to attend today. It's our pleasure to share some of our experience, and it's an honor to be called upon by the CTCN to present some of the working experience we have in attempting to address some of the issues that Heather pointed out during the introduction. So what we're going to talk about today, the focus of our presentation, is on MEA reporting and building climate resilience using integrated information management systems. And we're going to focus on, we'll talk about generally the work that we've been doing in this regard, but really focus and ground the discussion in our experience working with the government of Antigua and Barbuda. And fortunately, we have Jason Williams with us today to share his experience with implementing some of these solutions. So first off, just some brief introductions. So my name is Dave Oswald, as introduced by Heather. I'm the founder and president of DE Design and Environment, which is a design and environmental consultancy and technology company based in Canada, in Montreal and Vancouver, primarily in Vancouver, founded in 2005. And we work essentially in providing integrated solutions, largely using data analytics and policy analysis to solve problems and improve decision-making for governments, international organizations, and the private sector, as well as with not-for-profit organizations and NGOs and civil society. Ava? You're muted, Ava.
Sorry, I'm Ava Maxam, and I'm the Deputy Director here at the Mona Geoinformatics Institute. We're based in Kingston, Jamaica, at the University of the West Indies, Mona campus. And we essentially operate as a knowledge-based consultancy, and we specialize in value-added services and analysis. A lot of our work is in geospatial systems, in development and implementation. And we also do quite a bit of project management, leading the execution of a wide variety of solutions, not just across countries, but across entire regions.
We've been working together, DE and MGI, since 2013 was our first project together, largely in the Caribbean, but we've come together, and this is, I think, an important lesson for those that are either members of or considering to be members of the CTCN, through just our network and discovering our shared expertise and complementary skills and history. MGI is very strong in the technical side of things and geospatial technologies, and DE more on the policy, information and data analysis. So we came together to engage in projects, and since our coming together, and before that, we've done a number of projects in this area. If you look at this list of our partnerships experience, we've implemented more than 35 systems. We have 25 years of developing the systems combined. We've worked in over 35 countries. We've done a tremendous amount of capacity development and training and workshops. A large part of what we do is focused on building capacity in different countries and within different organizations. And we've worked across the SDGs. So although our work and our shared experiences were largely in the environment, we do touch on socioeconomic issues, risk issues, disaster issues, economic development issues. So we cover the whole swath of the SDGs as well as MEAs, and we'll get into the MEAs today.
So our projects have spanned from developing multi-hazard mapping and vulnerability assessments towards integrated planning and reduction of vulnerability in communities across Jamaica. Quite a few of those, especially under the context of climate change impacts and adaptation. And we also try to incorporate in a lot of our projects the context of sensitive groups, communities that are particularly vulnerable, and those natural ecosystems that tend to be very sensitive to changes as well. So we've worked with governments, corporate entities, engineers, community-based organizations at various levels of, be it systems implementation, visualization, mitigation, or even resilience and policy development. And we've had quite a few award-winning projects in vulnerability and hazards, including our Natural Hazards Atlas. And a few of our systems as well have gained attention, winning awards for quite how, impacting and how they assist with adaptation at the various levels. Go ahead, David.
Yes, so we've touched on our partnership. So we've been working together since 2013. As Eva had mentioned, really the focus of what we do as a combined effort is developing smart environmental resistant systems. And as Eva has noted, many of the systems that we've created have received quite a bit of recognition. So what we're going to talk about today to set the stage is one of those systems or one of those approaches that we've been working on. Eva, anything to add there?
So usually in these cases, we based our methods on quite a sound understanding of, the physical science behind looking at environmental change, adaptation. And what's important here as well in our collaboration is that we take a data-driven or evidence-based approach to how we go about our solutions.
And in our approach as well, if I might add, who we work with ends up being part of our team. That's the way kind of we approach things, and we're very happy, fortunate, and honored to have Jason Williams join us today from the government of Antigua and Barbuda. And I'll just pass the parole over to him to give a few words about himself and his organization.
Thank you, David, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. My name is Jason Williams, as mentioned earlier. I'm the data manager and the head of the Monitoring, Evaluation, and Data Management Unit in the Ministry of Health, Wellness, and the Environment from Antigua and Barbuda. The Department of Environment was established in 2019 and to the passage of the Environmental Protection and Management Act, and it has several functions. The DOE is the lead agency in Antigua and Barbuda as it relates to developing and implementing sustainable development, the climate change, environment and natural resource management policies and activities. We are the national focal point for several multilateral environmental agreements. For example, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, and the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. We manage a wide portfolio of projects funded by the Global Environment Facility, the Green Climate Fund, the Adaptation Fund, and the DOE is also accredited to both the Green Climate Fund as well as the Adaptation Fund. The project that funded the development of Antigua and Barbuda's environmental information system was funded by the Global Environment Facility. And the main objective of that project was to help improve the way we manage data and information on the environment to improve reporting to the said multilateral environmental agreements. I'll speak more later on. Back over to you, David.
Thank you, Jason. So given that context, we're going to walk through just a general presentation of our work, but then also what does the work mean? So I know many of you attending this webinar are probably experts in MEAs or very familiar with them, but some of you may not be. So we're just going to kind of paint the context first and then get into the actual solution. So the situation we're faced with, if we look at the news, and as we know from the research and the literature and the latest reports from the IPCC, or IPBES or other global assessments, is that we're in a situation globally that is quite concerning. So from a land degradation standpoint, we have 12 million hectares of arable land lost to degradation annually. From a biodiversity standpoint, we have 10 to 30% of mammal, bird, and amphibian species are threatened with extinction. And then we have a very serious problem with climate change and the need for mitigating greenhouse gas emissions, as well as adapting to the changes that are occurring and projected to occur. So this is, some of you I'm sure you're familiar with this. Essentially what we're doing, we as a species, is pushing the boundaries. So we're pushing the limits with respect to the planetary boundaries using the model by Stefan et al. From the Resilience Institute in Stockholm. So what does this mean for MEAs and for the work, what we're going to talk about today? Well, in order to understand and manage where global society is at with respect to these pressures and these slices and where we're pressing the boundaries and where we may impinge on certain planetary boundaries, we need to have an understanding of where we're at with respect to the MEAs and multilateral agreements that have been implemented to help us address these problems. And in doing so, we need to have data and reporting to benchmark what progress is being made, as Heather was noting with NDCs, and then also reporting on how progress is being made on NDCs from a UN Climate Change Convention standpoint. So what is the problem? What's the challenge with specifically MEA reporting? What is MEA reporting? Well, multilateral environmental agreements, as Jason has said, are international legal agreements which outline processes and parameters for managing various environmental issues. So three of the big ones are biodiversity conservation, climate change, etc., land degradation, persistent organic pollutants, wetlands, etc., etc. So the Rio Conventions, which we'll be talking about largely today, specifically UNFCCC, were initiated in 1992 at the Rio Summit, and they're the three most prominent conventions that we deal with in our work, and which many countries around the world are parties to. So the Climate Change Convention, the UNFCCC, the Biodiversity Convention, the UN Convention for Biological Diversity, Conservation of Biological Diversity, and the UNCCD for combating desertification, as Jason has mentioned. So the MEAs guide parties, so parties being countries that have signed on to these conventions, with respect to their national policies, and they're required to report on progress and submit plans for making progress. Hence, these MEAs are critical to global progress on sustainable development, essential for us to address where we're at with respect to, as a global society, impacting the planetary boundaries. And you can see here on the right, we've just included a bit of a schematic here as a party, and then the reporting to the different conventions. So we have UNFCCC, the CBD, and UNCCD, as well as what we've noted here is note the synergy. So this is something that's being discussed widely at UNEP and throughout the UN, is attempting to have more integrated reporting and capitalize on the synergy between these conventions. So biodiversity obviously is linked to climate change. There's impacts on climate change on biodiversity, as well as land degradation is linked to. And in fact, there's shared reporting indicators between these conventions. Also noted here is the synergy between the SDGs, specifically the environmental SDGs, but across the SDGs as well. So what we're going to talk about is how our work thus far has attempted to bring digital technology and innovation to the parties and to the UN to help to operationalize some of action on reporting to these to the MEAs, but then also fostering synergy between them. So some of the major challenges with MEA reporting thus far are parties are required to submit reports on a periodic basis to the MEAs. And these reports many of you are familiar with them, are very burdensome. There's a lot of work that goes into creating national communications for the UNFCCC, national biodiversity reports, affected country party reports, et cetera, et cetera. So they require a lot of work. So innovation and tools to support and help make that work easier are desperately needed. There's some significant challenges in place within the countries with respect to data sharing, the formatting of data, the alignment of that data and those with MEA indicators, both spatially and over time. And so the result of some of these challenges is inefficiency, often lower quality reports, and a lack of congruency with the objectives of the MEAs, as well as lack of systematic analysis across the parties, looking at it from a secretariat standpoint. So there's definitely a need for more integration reporting across the conventions. And what we have sought to do with our work is to facilitate synergies and advance progress on these challenges. Ava?
So often in our work, there is this major gap identified with the absence of a mechanism that's particularly tailored for MEAs. And that could be for collating, analyzing, or visualizing information, or even for automating processes. And just doing that in one place, in one go. So our years of experience working with a variety of focal points allows us to fine-tune our system to tackle particular issues in MEA reporting. It all starts, however, with balancing or understanding that balance of MEA requirements with national development needs and focus. So our dedication to building meaningful systems and functional requirements depend greatly on how we go about interacting with stakeholders, focal points, and having those joint development sessions to make sure that we garner input from the focal points in making our systems meaningful.
So one of the key areas of concern with respect to MEA reporting is data acquisition. So our focus, as mentioned, has been on the Rio Conventions, biodiversity, climate change, and UNCCD reporting. And one of the issues for anybody that's worked with the secretariats or is at a secretariat is indicators change periodically. So this is not a static problem. It's not like you have one set of indicators that then stays in place for 20 years. So with the COP decisions, Paris Agreement being a good example, what's happening at the UNCBD for doing the post-2020 framework, these change. So we interact very closely with the secretariats in understanding where things are moving from a policy standpoint and how that then impacts the required data and indicators to have continuity in data and reporting. Another aspect that is a major challenge is data acquisition processes need to be planned. We need to have QA procedures in place, and then the metadata needs to be fully documented to go along with those indicators. Ava?
Yeah, it is quite a pain point expressed by governments and organizations in reporting environmental data, where there's this difficulty with the acquisition process. You know, the lack of willingness to share data, bureaucratic red taping, disjointed efforts, all of these contribute to a mess when it comes to trying to report data. So what we propose with our system is a collection of options and solutions for overcoming these issues. And these can range from a detailed assessment of the focal points and their needs, to mapping linkages, to multiple data sources that will feed into the system. In fact, we've found that successful systems rely greatly on establishing those networks as sources and sinks for making sure that the information is consumed. Go ahead, David.
Yes. And a key point there, another, as Ava was alluding to, is data sharing. And this has come up over and over and over in pretty much every project that we've dealt with. So we've become actually quite proficient, I would say, even experts on creating processes, systems to support those processes, and agreements even for data sharing within countries as well as between countries and throughout regions. So the MEA reports require the input of data from several agencies. So if you're doing, say, a national biodiversity report, or your national communication, or whatever the report might be, there is very, very seldom, if ever, are you going to just consult with one agency to get the data required in order to submit that report. So data sharing processes are absolutely essential. And what we have found in the countries that we worked in is setting up those data sharing processes from the get-go, whether it be starting informally and then ultimately leading to either MOUs for the project or for widely use, or in some cases even legislation to put those in place. Because what that does is it creates a shared understanding that certain data is to be shared. Often, because we're dealing with government agencies, data is a public good. You know, it's meant to enhance governance. And what we try and do then is interface then to create our system, implement the systems that we implement, in alignment with the data sharing frameworks institutionally that are implemented. And along with that goes interfacing what we produce with any existing data management systems. And Ava, maybe if you want to speak to that a bit.
And facilitating sharing of environmental information is important at both the local and the regional scale. And this is to ensure responsible and sustainable development. You know, and we can do this while maintaining stewardship or protection of our natural resources. It's a lack of sharing of environmental information that easily can lead to misinformation or even manipulation of reporting. You know, that could result in all kinds of biases or sole interests. Not being able to share this type of information hinders compliance and, of course, reporting to these international treaties for which our governments are held accountable in meeting their mandates. So the organization and accessibility of information is easily facilitated through our systems being built to monitor and disseminate this information. When it comes to data sharing as well, levels of analysis and reporting that can be done is really based on the quality and consistency of data in the system. So in order for high quality reporting to be performed, the data must be quality assured, it must be consistently gathered over time. Of course, it must be of sufficient spatial resolution, temporal resolution, must have the proper metadata in place, and so on. So design considerations for systems to tackle this must take into account data quality checks and systematic documentation. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, exactly. And as Ava noted, data sharing is absolutely fundamental to getting high quality reports, which are needed. If we don't have the good data, we don't have the quality assured data with proper metadata, we don't have a good idea of where things are at nationally for a party, and then correspondingly internationally. And for some of you that are involved with the MEA reporting, there are systems in place for sharing of global data, so global data sets for, say, doing land degradation reporting and so forth. But what we need to do and what we've sought to do with our work is to not only accommodate that, so we can use coarse resolution global data that's provided by the UNCCD, for example, but to also get other sources of data, whether they be higher resolution drone data from different agencies, or even getting data from the private sector. So what we really try and do is create a one data solution of high quality information that can then really help to inform decision making at multiple different scales, both temporally and spatially. Reporting, a major issue concern is reporting. What we found, and this is coming from looking at the Secretariat level across different reports, is having inconsistent data that's used, whether it be between years, so between reports that have been submitted by one party, or across different countries. And so the operation, the standardization to some degree of different data sets is definitely an issue that we try to address. There needs to be some continuity in data and source information to maintain quality reporting to gauge progress. It's hard to gauge progress on greenhouse gas emissions, for instance, if there's a different metric being used every time a report is created, or whether there's a different metric between different parties. And the standards set out by the secretariats for the reporting requirements are very good at doing that, but it's the data. Like, we need to ensure that that data meets the needs and specifications from the secretariats in order to make sure there's continuity. And as the reporting requirements change, additional information is required. So a good example is transparency reporting for the UNFCCC now, and then having some sort of adaptable and modular information system to support those changes. Therefore, there's continuity, there's data continuity as things do change, which they will. Ava? So
with this, taking changes into consideration and the requirements, systems that tackle reporting of this nature must be dynamic. It must take into consideration utilization of a variety of sources, multiple sources, and changing requirements, and providing a range of outputs and visualization tools also enhances the reporting ability. And then this goes towards garnering greater uptake of the information by a wide range of users. Go ahead, David.
Yes. And the last area of concern is indicators themselves, and how do we prioritize? Because there's a vast array of indicators. You look at the indicators for even UNFCCC reporting. It's a long list. So often when we're working with different countries, we have to establish priorities. Because if you try and implement a catch-all system right out of the gates, there's just not resources, time or time primarily in order to do that. So what we do in order to address that concern is we do a gap and needs assessment with the stakeholders to prioritize what are the most important issues, what are the most important indicators per country or per organization, right at the very initial stage of these projects. And so in order to do that, what we do is we do a very careful review of the MEA reports, so the national communications, biodiversity reports, affected country reports, etc., that have been produced, and consult with different stakeholders, focal points, and other stakeholders within the countries to establish what those priority indicators are. So therefore, we get a shortened list that we can really focus on. Then with those priority indicators established, we can then focus, really drill down on the data acquisition processes for them, the quality assurance processes that are in place for them, the processing, the sharing, and then the reporting, and analyze how well those are working, and even to the extent to which we map information sources to those priority indicators. And then we conduct an evaluation of the country's reporting with the current practices at the Secretariat to ensure that how well are those indicators being reported on. Sometimes they're very good. Sometimes there's not much work that needs to be done with the actual reporting process. It's more about just implementing a solution to facilitate and to kind of not automate, but to basically make it more efficient. But in other cases, there is some need for leveling up the capacity and the quality of the reporting for those indicators. Ava, do you want to add anything to that last point?
So our approach is to build an integrative system at the national level. And this has been informed by years of experience, learning and understanding the key needs of focal points, how to prioritize requirements of MEAs, and how to identify those indicators that are most relevant, assigning levels of priority at different stages or contexts will offset otherwise overwhelming efforts in trying to tackle everything at the same level of scrutiny. This is reflected when with options that are available in the system for assigning priorities and levels. Go ahead, David.
And that brings us to the solution we're going to talk about today, and the implementation solution, which is the Core Environmental Information System, Core EIS, which is, I'll pass this over to Ava and team at MGI to talk about the actual platform itself. Ava?
Sure. So our Core EIS is a platform to efficiently collect, analyze, and learn about the changing factors of the environment. You can go ahead, David. Next slide. So what is the Core EIS? It's this integrative and web-based system allowing users to handle data, indicators, maps even. It is built specifically with MEA reporting needs in mind, while allowing administrators to manage how users interact with the system. And this is done via a permissions module. What I'll do is hand over to David Thomas, our lead programmer. Go ahead, David.
Okay, Ava. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. So the Core EIS is a system that allows its users to manage and analyze data so that it helps with the ease of reporting to the various MEAs, right? The data within the system includes reports, research papers. David, you could go ahead and switch to the other side. Thank you. So the system allows for the storage of various types of data, such as geospatial data, chart data, research papers, and so on, right? Within the system, users have the flexibility of actually adding various tags and categories to the data when uploading it to the system. So this allows for data to be properly organized within the system and allows for users to easily find data when needed. Within the system, various features can be organized into 6 different groups. User management. So this basically allows users to log into the system, log out of the system, and to view their profile information. Reports. This allows users to actually create a report, and this is done by, of course, selecting the particular MEA that they would like to be reported to. They'll be able to then select the particular set of indicators that they would like to use for the report. Then they can select multiple data sources that they'd like to attach to a report. Users also have the ability to make edits to a report or to delete a report. When it comes down to MEA, it's a similar principle to the reports. So users have the ability to create various MEAs. They have the ability to make modifications to the information within the MEA in the system, and they're also able to delete an MEA. For indicators, users also have the ability to create an indicator and attach various data sources to an indicator. They can modify an indicator and they can also delete an indicator. In the system, we also provide a module that users can basically create multiple organizations within the system. So this also helps to say that, okay, data is actually, we receive data from this particular organization and that particular organization. So it eases the ability for users to say, okay, this is where the source of the data was from. And the last thing within the system is site analytics. So this basically gives users an overview of the various activities that are performed within the system in a real-time basis. Okay, so what does the system do really, right? So fosters collaboration. So as I said earlier, because data within the system doesn't come from just one source, it comes from many different sources. What you'll find is that because we have to get data from different organizations and different agencies, it allows the fostering of collaboration between different entities to retrieve data and for reporting. The system allows for the appropriate logs and storage of data. So when adding data to the system, users, as I said before, have the flexibility of adding different categories to data. They're able to put specific information to the creation of data so that when they're looking within the system, it's easily found. And this data is stored in a secure database. The system allows for the ease of report creation. So with the intuitive user interface, with the click of a few buttons and inputting of certain data within the fields, a report can be created very easily. It provides the facility for reports to be created for specific MEA indicators. So when creating a report, we ensure that users select the particular MEA that they would like the report to be created under, and then this narrows down the indicator that is available to them. After the indicator is selected, then the system goes a step further to narrow down the data sources that are available to be attached to the report. So what you'll find is that you won't have to search the entire system to say, okay, what data source should I use for this? Is it attached to the right MEA? Is it attached to the right indicator? The system basically eases that process to just allows it to be narrowed down to the specific data sources that you would need for that particular report. And lastly, the system basically supports the reporting to multiple MEAs because you have the flexibility of creating different MEAs so that, of course, the system will facilitate the reporting to different MEAs such as the UNFCCC, UNCBD, and the UNCCD.
Okay, so we're just going to show a brief demo of the platform itself and what it actually looks like, how it works.
Welcome to the Core EIS, brought to you by Mona Geoinformatics Institute and Design and Environment. The Core EIS is a web-based platform that allows its users to be better able to report to the various MEAs. Upon going on the Core EIS, a user will be presented with the landing page. The landing page provides a brief introduction as to what the system is about. On the system, there are various reports and various different MEAs. From the landing page, a user can log into the system by selecting the Start Login button. Upon a user providing their email and password, they will select the login button and gain access to the system, provided that the credentials are correct. When a user gains access to the system, they will be presented with a dashboard. The dashboard will give users a synopsis of the amount of data that is within the system. Currently, there are 3 reports, 30 indicators, 5 MEAs, and 24 organizations. Within each section, you'll notice there is a Quick Look button. Upon selecting the Quick Look button, the preview section will be populated with the information for that section. Currently, we can see the 3 reports that are within the system on the preview section. Users can also go to a particular section by using the side panel. Let us go to the reports. Currently, we're seeing the reports listing page. On the reports listing page, we're able to see the report name, the MEA associated with a report, indicator, description, and date. Users also have the option to edit a report using the pencil icon or to delete a report using the trash bin. Users also have the ability to search for a report or to create a new report. Let us now go into a particular report by selecting the name of the report. When a user goes into a report, they will be presented with the report's detail page. The user will be able to see additional information such as the category, report curator, and the focal point user. On the page, a user will be able to see the information contained within the report. There is a PDF within this report. Users are able to peruse the PDF to their liking. Users also have the option to edit the report, delete a report, or to download the data within the report. Let us now take a look at a different report. Similar to the other report, we're able to see additional information such as the category, report curator, and the focal point user. We're also able to modify the report by editing, deleting, or by downloading the data. By scrolling down, On the page, we're able to see the layer that is within this report. Users will have the ability to perform various interactions with the layer. A user is able to drag the layer. A user is able to zoom in, and a user is able to zoom out. Let us now take a look at the last report within the system, the rainfall report. So this report has a similar look to the other two reports. However, this report contains chart data. We're able to see that the default display will be a line chart. Users have the flexibility to change how the data is shown to them. A user can be able to see the data as a pie chart or as a bar chart. Let us now navigate to the MEA section by selecting it from the side panel. Now we're able to see the MEA listing page. This has a similar setup to the reports listing page. We're able to see the MEA name, a description for each MEA, the abbreviation associated with the MEA. We're able to download a manifesto if present. We're also able to edit the MEA or delete the MEA. Users also have the ability to search for an MEA or to create an MEA. Let us now take a look at one of these MEAs by selecting the name. Now we are on the details page for this MEA. On this page, users have the ability to update the MEA or to delete the MEA. Users are able to see the icon associated with this MEA, the name, description, website associated with the MEA, and the document that is associated with the MEA. Let us now navigate to the indicators section of the system. Similar to before, the listing page for indicators have a similar look and feel as that of the MEAs. We're able to see the indicator name, the MEA associated with the indicator, the category associated with the indicator, and the priority of that particular indicator. We're also able to edit the indicator or to delete the indicator. Similar to the other sections, we are also able to search within this page or to create an indicator from this page. Let us now take a look at an indicator. On the details page for this indicator, we're able to perform an update to the indicator, or we're able to delete the indicator if needs be. We're able to see the icon associated with the indicator, able to see the name, description if it is provided, the MEA it's associated with, SDGs associated with it, if there's any provided, category, priority, and if the information should be made public. Thank you for your time. This wraps up the presentation of the core EIS. Do enjoy the rest of your day.
Great. So that was an excellent presentation. Sec. So that gives us a general idea of what the core EIS is. And now I'm going to pass it over to Ava to talk about a few of the cases that we've dealt with in Antigua and Barbuda, after which Jason Williams will talk about the implementation of the platform in the country. Ava?
So we see that the system, looks at data collation from multiple sources, and can do so for different purposes, different contexts, depending on the MEA. Data relevant to climate change indicators, for example, can span the range from coastal features, like what you're seeing here for this case of sea level rise and coastal erosion and land loss in Barbuda. Go ahead, David. And this can also look at, impacts on water supply. An example here is the drought risk information that you're seeing on watershed zones for Antigua and Barbuda. Go ahead again, David. And of course, looking at even impacts on terrestrial ecosystems. And in this case, for Antigua and Barbuda, we were looking at degraded lands, those areas that are particularly vulnerable because of loss of natural vegetation. Go ahead, David. So, what else can we do with our system? And we have also developed what we call add-on features. These are features that enhance MEA reporting and are suitable for even a wider range of needs, such as the Common Data Storage Facility, or the CDSF. This is a platform that can handle a variety of different types of data and organize, catalog, and present the information clearly. The EIS fetches raw data from the Common Data Storage Facility in that case. Another tool that we've developed is spatial querying and map inventory, and that organizes, catalogs, and presents a variety of document formats, in addition to geospatial data and maps. And what's been very, very useful in these kinds of deployments is trying to interact with the public. So it's very, very public facing, in that you have these really nice visualization tools that can appeal to a wider range of audiences. Another tool in our arsenal is custom MEA indicators. So what we've come across is that sometimes focal points, or even for national development purposes, that particular government may ask for particular MEA indicators that may be slightly different, but are still necessary. So we incorporate these additional indicators, and it can even be cross-cutting in considering how the system may be utilized across sectors. We also have developed an environmental data gap analysis and data integration plan in building out these systems. So in this case, in-depth assessment into data gaps, risks, and recommendations towards long-term strategies for integrating data into the system. And we've found that this goes a long way in ensuring sustainability of the system. And we've also conducted user experience audits, so that's looking at evaluating the system for its user experience, including its effectiveness, its uptake, its intuitiveness, and applicability. And of course, this is very, very important when it comes to M&E requirements for monitoring and evaluation. And we can also, create a wide range of custom features. So if it is that you want to adapt the main system with custom built tools to meet very, very highly specialized requirements, then we're also quite experienced in doing that. Go ahead, David. So through our experience with governments, corporate entities, engineers, community-based organizations, for vertical and horizontal solutions, and we do that in trying to benefit every level, we have been able to specialize in customizing for particular needs. So St. Lucia in particular, you're seeing that example here where St. Lucia in particular wanted to focus on the back end with data storage management for their climate change reporting. And in this case, we developed the Common Data Storage Facility, and this was a data storage management tool. Go ahead, David. While Antigua and Barbuda wanted to boost the front end of their system to ensure public appeal, interaction, and access. And in that case, we implemented the Natural Resources Inventory tool for access to a wide variety of formats of information, including spatial and non-spatial data. So it was important for them to have the visualization side of things really out there for public appeal. Go ahead, David.
Exactly. And so with that, I'm going to pass the parole over to Jason Williams, from the Department of Environment of the Government of Antigua and Barbuda to talk about exactly that, their implementation, their progress so far, and what their plans are going forward. Jason, floor is yours.
Thank you, David and Ava, and thank you again for the opportunity to share on the experience from Antigua and Barbuda. Before I get into my slides, I'll just want to commend and acknowledge the work done by MGI and DE in implementing this project and developing our environmental information systems. They were able to listen to our needs and build a system that is custom fit for us and for our purposes. So the DOE manages a wide portfolio of projects, as I would have mentioned, and the Global Environment Facility funded project that developed our environmental information system, again, was aiming to help us better manage data and information on the environment to improve reporting to these RIA conventions. So our environmental information system has two parts, as Ava would have shown on the slides and David Thomas during his presentation, that the system is comprised of two parts. We have our National Environmental Data and Information System, or our NEIS. So it's similar to the video that you guys would have seen. And we also have our Natural Resources Inventory. So what we wanted in Antigua and Barbuda, as Ava said, was to have it more appealing to have a system whereby persons can go on the site and be able to work with geospatial data. They would have, MGI and DE would have implemented this geospatial content management system, this GeoNode, whereby we're able to upload spatial data, we're able to work with the spatial data to create maps and for that data to then feed into our NEIS. So that was a huge plus for us. That's something that our stakeholders wanted from day one, and MGI and DE were able to deliver on that for us. So this system is managed by the Monitoring, Evaluation, and Data Management Unit. I work with a great team of professionals within this unit, and we coordinate our own projects, and we are responsible for managing the environmental information system. One of our biggest mission is to manage data in order to ensure timeliness, reliability, accuracy, and accessibility of the data and information that we have. Ava would have spoken about ensuring that we have rigorous quality assurance and quality controls systems built within the system. And this is something that is very key for us, very important for us. So before data is published on the site, we're ensuring that all the relevant information is there, that the metadata is included, that all the data is accurate. So when persons go on the site, they're able to get access to the most up-to-date and accurate data available on those environmental resources. The Department of Environment, we manage a technical advisory committee. So this is a group of government agencies, non-government agencies, and also private sector that provide us with technical support as it relates to managing our projects. So for this specific project, a subcommittee of our TAC was created, and that subcommittee was able to provide targeted technical guidance in the development of this system. They were involved in the planning phase, they were involved in the implementation, and now in the maintenance phase. Buy-in from our stakeholders were key and critical for this. So from the planning stage, even before we started to build anything, we had to go to our stakeholders to ask them and to have that conversation with them. What would they want to see in the system? And they were able to provide us with their feedback, and they were able to also guide the development of the system. And as I mentioned, now through into the maintenance phase. David, you can switch the slide. So under this project, we were able to sign several memorandum of understandings with government agencies, statutory corporations, and also non-governmental organizations. So we signed a total of 5. And what it says is that the DOE commits to providing these agencies with technical support as it relates to data management needs. We're able to also provide them with resources to boost their data management teams. And the agencies also were able to commit to providing data to the system and to support the system. So that was a huge plus for us. David would have mentioned the incorporation of our drone data. So we at the data management unit, we also manage geographic information systems database, so an environmental GIS database. And what we're aiming to do with the system as well is to help upload the data sets within our GIS database onto the platform to use the data that we're collecting out in the field. So the drone data that we're collecting, to see how that this can also be uploaded to the sites and be shared with the different agencies that we collaborate with. We're actually hosting a training today. So right after this webinar, I'm leaving to attend a training. So we're doing an internal training for the DOE, for the different units at the Department of Environment. So we're reintroducing them to the system and encouraging them to create accounts. These are persons who manage their own projects. So we're hoping to show to them that this system will be key in them getting access to data that's already existing, and for data that is generated under their projects as well, to encourage them to upload that data to the sites. So that training will be happening later today. And later on in the next upcoming weeks, we're planning on conducting other trainings with other stakeholders and encouraging them also to use the system and to upload their data as well. As I mentioned earlier as well, the main objective of creating the system was to help us better manage data to help with our reporting. So the NIST and the NRI are key in us reporting to the RIA conventions. We've spoken about it earlier, the climate change convention, the biodiversity, and the land degradation one. So all this data would assist us in better reporting to these conventions. David, you can go to the next slide. Okay, here I'm just sharing a few pictures that were taken. So this was the initial training on the NIST and the NRI took place in the heights of COVID. So as you see, everyone in the pictures wearing their mask. So we are allowed to have gatherings of up to 10 persons. So we had 3 persons from the consulting team. So we had the facilitators from MGI, and we had David Oswald as well participating in person with us in Antigua and Barbuda. And then we had 7 additional persons from my team within the room. However, we did have other persons join online, so they joined virtually. So in total, we had about 36 participants. You see the breakdown there, 12 males, 24 females who would have participated in the training. And we got a lot of feedback from them as well. So we have now entered into our service level agreement with MGI to help us maintain the system going forward. So a lot of the feedback that would have been received through this training and through our own use of the system, these are being implemented now. So the goal and the goal is always to improve the systems, to make it better. So that's our aim. And yeah, I think that's the end of my slide, David.
Yes,
Back
it
over
is.
to you guys. Yes.
Yep. Thank you very much, Jason. And for all the attendees, there have been a couple questions come in. We've logged them. We're going to have a Q&A session just as we wrap up here. So if you're thinking of questions, and don't worry, you're going to have the opportunity to have a dialogue just shortly here. So throughout the presentation, you've seen basically the problem, our solution, and then an implementation of the solution. But really, we're just getting started really with what we're doing. We've been at it for a while, like as a partnership for 7-9 years really now. But this is how we work. So going forward, we're just getting started. We worked with countries and the parties in the Caribbean. We're looking to work with other organizations, other countries elsewhere who are reporting to the MEAs. But then also as you can see, like the benefits from using this platform and this approach are not exclusive to MEA reporting. They facilitate national environmental information management in general. So this is how we work. We have a process by which we go about reviewing and reporting the reporting procedures for the MEAs. We evaluate the environmental data acquisition process and do a gap analysis, as mentioned. And then we can customize the platform to suit your needs, much as Ava had shown for St. Lucia and Antigua and Barbuda and other countries, because other countries or other groups have different priorities. Maybe it's disaster risk reduction or the need for enhanced visualization. Whatever it is, we can work with you to address those requirements or those desires. We deploy the core EOS and test it, and then we really place a lot of emphasis on training, capacity development, and then system monitoring and maintenance. As Jason had said, this is not a process by which it's delivered and then see you later, you never talk to us again. We're there to support the process and improve the system and adapt the system as things change and as you go forward. Ava?
Thanks, David. And both Jason and David brought up a very important point, and that's how do you consider the entire data lifecycle of the system? So it's not just about implementing and then leaving it there, but how is this mainstreamed to make sure that there's great uptake of it and you get a lot out of the system? So, we include this option to develop a very comprehensive maintenance plan, and that goes a long way towards sustainability of your system.
So the next steps for us, whenever we seek to engage with someone, and we'd encourage you to, even if you just have some questions or want to have a discussion, just reach out to us. Our numbers are here. You can get our contact information from the UNCCCN. And I would also encourage you to take advantage of, this is a very good example of how initial collaboration led to a partnership, which is now leading to who knows what, bigger and better things. So I really would like to emphasize the benefits of the UNCCD network because these problems cannot be solved by one organization. There needs to be collaboration amongst different groups with complementary expertise in order to address the major issues with respect to climate change, biodiversity loss, land degradation, as well as the other issues that we're facing with respect to sustainable development. So with that, I'd like to thank Ava, Jason, David, as well as the CTCN for allowing us to present today, and all of the attendees for taking your time, which we know is very valuable, to hear about what we've been working on and how we're trying to move forward the benchmark for addressing global sustainable development challenges through the core EIS. And we would like to open up the floor for any questions and answers. We've got some time here. So I'm going to ask you to send your Q&A questions through the chat, and we will then, I'll just moderate those and direct those to the right person. So thank you very much, everybody. And we're here to receive your questions. So please feel free to ask anything. Okay, so we've got some questions coming through here on the chat. Just going to, I'm not a WebEx expert, so I'm just gonna try to get this in a user format so I can. Okay, here we go. All right, let's see. Okay, first question I have here is from Songitu Ekpe. Apologize for the pronunciation. Kindly elaborate on how subnational level capacities can be built. Jason, would you mind responding to that? I know that with some of the NGOs that were involved in our process, we're heavily engaged in the development of the system. Perhaps you could talk a bit about some of the subnational capacities as well as in schools. I think that was one of the things you really were passionate about, getting schools involved with this. So Jason, do you have any comments about that question?
Thank you, David, and thank you for the question. So definitely. So as I would have mentioned earlier, stakeholder collaboration is key when implementing any projects of this nature. So what we would have done in the beginning was to go up, reach out to our stakeholders to get their needs and to start that conversation with them to see what they would want and how the system that we're building could be beneficial to them. So when we launched the system, and again, throughout the implementation phase, they were always involved. So throughout the implementation phase, when we had the training, the initial training, we had representatives from governments, we have from NGOs, we also have civil society organizations who would have participated in the training. And through that training, they were able to identify specific areas of the site, of the platforms that would be beneficial for them. So what we're hoping to do now is to continue that conversation with them. Like I could remember our most prominent environmental organization here, the Environmental Awareness Group, they've already identified the site as something that they can use. So we're now in discussions with them to host a training specifically geared towards them and their staff, and to see how we can incorporate the data that they're collecting into the platform. So again, having that discussion is key. And I also want to mention as well that the MGI and DE team were able to prepare a report for us on how to assess the use of the NIS and the NRI for other MEAs. So I don't think it was clearly stated earlier, but I'll state it now if it wasn't, that the NIS and the NRI were developed specifically for the Rio Convention. So those three conventions, climate change, biodiversity, and land degradation. However, in discussions with our stakeholders, we got the feedback that they work in other MEAs as well. So for example, the chemicals MEA. So they're asking how can they use the system and how can their data be incorporated in the system. So David and Ava and the team were able to put together a report for us that clearly outlines how this system can be used for those specific MEAs. So that's discussions that are ongoing right now with those specific stakeholders. So again, just having that discussion, that open discussion with the teams and your different stakeholders, that is key.
Of making people know about this platform. Then when we launched this in October in Antigua and Barbuda, I mean, we had a good 3 days of media where we're on the radio and television and so forth to get people aware of this. And that creates a lot of buzz and a lot of interest and engagement, whether it be with schools or with the civil society organizations or civil society in general. So I do fundamentally believe that approaches such as this can mobilize society towards being engaged with actual solutions. And I think of any time right now we hear all the doom and gloom and all these kind of negative things in the media about the way the world is going. I mean, we kind of need some positive things to work towards. And in our experience, I think humbly, I think we're doing some things that are actually making positive change. Another question here is from Bruce Chisholm to all panelists. Firstly, both the platform used today and content is excellent. Great, impressive presentations. Time, good, thank you. Your group is working this week on a proposal for the UNDDR, wherein we have proposed extended levels of interagency communication and cooperation, which is hugely important for disaster risk reduction. Most certainly, we will, as we move forward, we will advise your group as to progress in our project development, wherein we are targeting under our group's themes of climate and COVID. The issues regarding the bottlenecks you have all addressed is also great news. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that point, Bruce. Again, although this is focused on MEA reporting, disaster risk reduction is something that we've worked on, and risk mapping and capacity development. Ava and team at MGI has worked extensively on in terms of developing systems. Ava, do you have any comments about how this could be used in the DRR capacity?
Sure. I like that this participant has brought up themes of climate and COVID. And, we're a geospatial company where we've had to work with quite a wide range of data, and issues with COVID also being one of them. So, ranging from logistics to health parameters and variables and so on. So linking that back to, how is that impacted or worsened or, whatever by climate change impacts. Again, that's something that we could easily integrate just by looking at the data sources that would feed that kind of information into the system. So regardless of, which country it is, these are all parameters that once we identify those data sources and what it is that you want to focus on, this is something that can be easily integrated into the system.
Exactly, and I'll just add briefly to that. I think one of the things that we've been successful with, again, humbly, on this project is making sure people are aware of it, that it's used. Now, I've seen other platforms that have been developed specifically for disaster risk reduction that, even disaster risk organizations have trouble using. It's not as accessible. Whereas what we've attempted to do is take an open data approach, therefore fostering sharing of data, using platforms like in the case of Antigua and Barbuda for using GeoNode, which is it's an open GIS approach. It's not it's not a proprietary code or anything like that. It can be used by anybody and then integrated with other systems. Even if a country's got an Esri platform in place for the land use management systems, we can interface with that. So by having it accessible, I think is, especially for something as critical as disaster risk reduction, we need to, I think we've done a pretty decent job of that. So just going forward, I've got we love to collaborate, climate change, land use topics in Nigeria. Again, we're open to collaboration. I mean, our contact information is shared. Just reach out to us. So like I said, the first thing we do is have a conversation. Here, we've got a question from, the Chukwemeka Okebugwu. I apologize for the name. Can this project be replicated in other interested countries? Absolutely. So we have worked with the governments of St. Lucia and Antigua and Barbuda. We've worked regionally across the Caribbean. We've also consulted with several different countries in different capacities, both MGI and DE. We're very familiar with contextual change. Different countries have different situations, biophysically as well as politically and socioeconomically. And our idea, when we extracted and kind of pulled out our best learnings from the country level interventions that we've done, is to create a platform that we feel can be implemented as a starting point for any country, like any country that's reporting to an MEA or any country that needs assistance with their national environmental data and information. We can accelerate progress because we're implementing lessons learned and already have developed a solution that we can go from, rather from like 0, we're going to start at like the 60-kilometer mark in that 100-kilometer race, right? So yes, we can definitely apply this in other countries. Okay, we've got some. Do you provide internship or postdoc opportunities? Maybe Ava at University of West Indies has some postdoc opportunities.
Yeah, from time to time, we'll have the projects support postdoc or graduate students or interns. So feel free to reach out to us and, we'll see if we can get one of those going for you.
Okay, so we've got a very good question here from the UNCCC and Secretariat. So thanks for the presentation. Can you share your experience in collecting data from private sectors? Like an example you mentioned using drones. Great question. Now this is a great question. I'm going to pass this first to Jason, and then Ava, if you want to comment after on integration with the private sector, which is, we have lessons learned, I think, in that department. Jason?
Hi, thank you, David, again, and thanks for the question. So I just want to start by saying that we have to establish trust with these private sector agencies. So my unit, we are responsible to also prepare our national greenhouse gas inventory. And for example, for the sectors, the industrial sector, the energy sector, we would need to reach out to these private sector agencies to provide us with data. Now, at first, it was a bit challenging, more so because they would have thought that the reason we're requesting data is for like tax purposes or something along that line. But after discussions with them and explanations and just open communication with them, the trust was built, and they were able to provide us with the data. So we've been preparing national greenhouse gas inventories in-house now for at least the past 3 reports. And like I said, initially it was a bit hard to get the data, but now they're more open to us, they know us. So I believe once you establish a good working relationship with them, you clearly explain to them the purpose of the data and to show how the data is being used also, because they would also want to know, why are they giving this data? What is this going towards? So by providing them with the final output, so like after the analysis of the data is completed, we'd always go back to them and show to them, this is how your data was used. This is the final product. This is us reporting to these international multilateral environmental agreements and providing your data. So this feeds into something bigger. The work that we're doing with drones is more so for us as it relates to environmental management. So we would go out and do the drone missions and collect the data, but there isn't much interaction with the private sector when it comes to that part.
If I could add, yes, thanks, David. We we actually have found that systems that work and are really successful are the ones that incorporate all the sectors, so government, civil society, and the private sector. We have quite a few examples of where, from the very beginning of the project, we ensure that they are a key stakeholder. Projects, for example, looking at climate change impacts on our shoreline. We recently developed one for assessing mangrove health. And, mangroves are so key for stabilizing our shoreline. It's like our first line of defense. And it's been found to be one of those, really sustainable lines of defense once you're allowing your mangroves to grow and flourish. And interestingly enough, the private sector ended up being a big part of that project because a lot of their investment, a lot of their infrastructure, their livelihoods, their staff, clients and so on are found on our shorelines where, a lot of our work is in small island states, for example, where tourism is a big part of the economy. And once, we could pitch the usefulness of the system in that way, we got the buy-in from the private sector quite easily. But it's crucial that that's done from the very beginning, and then from that sets the stage for being able to share data, share information, set up your MOUs and so on.
Yeah, and just a brief comment to add to both what Jason and Ava have said. I mean, there's a trust issue, even if for those that have been to the COPs or worked at all with UN secretariats, there's this line between the private sector and then governance, like in governments that sometimes there's contentious issues, if you want to look at, say, biopiracy and intellectual property in the CBD's case and so forth. But one thing that is resoundingly clear from my experience thus far, particularly with the UNFCCC and then also the UNCBD and UNCCD as well, is the need to greater engage the private sector with mainstreaming the objectives of the conventions. So, I mean, we're not going to get a handle on climate change mitigation or adaptation or the reduction of loss of biodiversity and the degradation of land without having the private sector, say agriculture companies and energy companies and so forth, engaged. So I think it's very important in situations like this where we have a very tangible, this is not like a high level broad discussion, it's a very tangible, actionable platform and processes to go along with it, to have the private sector engaged in the implementation and management of the information and provision of data, I think is hugely important. And I think going forward, we're going to attempt to make additional efforts with getting the private sector engaged with our projects right from the get-go. We do have them at the table, but usually when we start, it's largely government agencies and civil society organizations who are the main stakeholders. But I would like to see more engagement with the private sector with this. I think there's a lot to be gained on the part of the private sector from having access to data to understand some of the risks they're presented with, tourism, for instance, in the Caribbean and agriculture in other situations. And then there's a lot to be gained as well from a governance standpoint by having that data that can be used to create more informed policies to reduce risks and so forth. So I had a question here about the language. So on parle français aussi. On peut parler français et travailler en français for the person from Georgette Bilonde Mtende from Congo. Donc, nous sommes capabilités en langues différentes, espagnol, français, etc., etc. So if you have questions in French, shoot. Les questions en français, allez-y. So we've got, okay, I'm cycling through the questions here. A lot of interest in collaboration. Again, reach out, whether it be academic or whether it be more actionable, like in terms of implementation. For the MSc in food, interest in students. Thank you for the COVID matter. We have targeted public hospitals in the matter of climate. We are proposing a programmatic approach, more of a linkages to carbon finance for the CEPAL region, okay? Again, this is an interesting, Bruce, thank you again for the point. The linkages with carbon finance, if I may, I'd like to just give some brief comments and maybe perhaps Jason, if you'd like to comment as well on this. Like, so carbon finance a climate finance, if you will, is a very broad term. Like it means a lot of things to different people, like green bonds, carbon markets, and so forth. I'll use the broad term of climate finance. This tool essentially was financed in part, I guess you could say, by climate finance coming from the GEF. I would say environmental finance in general. But what the benefit of taking an approach like we have done with this, and what we've experienced with the countries we work with, the more you can demonstrate you're really making actionable progress on very, very clear objectives, whether it be from MEAs or whether it be from UNEP or UNDP or Sustainable Development Objectives in general, the SDGs, the better positioned you are to gain access to carbon finance or climate finance, right? It's like having a good credit score. If you have your act together as a country and you're doing really progressive things and executing on projects very, very effectively, I mean, that puts you become like a beautiful country to invest in to help you address those challenges from like a multilateral funding standpoint. And I think the same could be said for private financing if you look at carbon finance from a private standpoint, because private sector organizations and the mobilization of private finance is being heavily influenced by ESG priorities right now. And we can see this in the energy sector in Canada with respect to some companies gaining access to financing just large because of their company's projected growth or development of the company, but also like how they're positioning themselves and managing ESG criteria. So I think in both elements, what an approach such as this, a data-driven approach, it gives you the metrics. It gives you a baseline where you can demonstrate the due diligence that you've been acting on specific criteria to address the challenges, whether it be mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions, adaptation, advancement of gender priorities, whatever it might be. Jason, do you have any comments on that from kind of a governance, climate finance standpoint?
Thanks, David. Not necessarily. So the Department of Environment, as I mentioned in the introduction, we're accredited to both the Green Climate Fund and the Adaptation Fund, and we get access to GEF funding as well. So from the climate fund financing part, that's something that we do. I can't speak much about the carbon financing though. That's outside of my realm.
Yeah, like I was speaking generally in climate finance in terms. So I'm just going to move on to the next question here. Bruce, again, the focus of the stage is hospitals. Okay, again, you really make the case in your comments about the need for disaster risk reduction and then also measures and methods to address those challenges. Bruce, Jamaica is indeed our current main target. However, using the program, we plan to duplicate the model we propose globally. Sure, each nation will be somewhat unique. Great to hear. Shane, okay. Hello, Shane. Good to hear from you. Received on the. Can you tell us about any challenges in deploying Core AS in Antigua and SIDS? Sure. Ava, do you want to start with that? Challenges?
Well, yeah. I mean, the biggest thing to overcome is that acquisition of data, and making sure that the sources are reliable, because it is the quality of data that determines a good output or useful outputs to you. So that's usually the biggest challenge, and that's why it's crucial for us in setting up our functional requirements, in setting up our joint application development sessions, that we are talking to the focal points, talking to stakeholders, talking to who will be the key end users of the system. So that's how we try and mitigate that issue as much as possible. What we're also good at is if we find that one particular data set may not be available, what are other proxy data sets that may be used to try and compensate for that? So it may be that we find other sources or try to come up with other variables that might, portray this. An example of that was in looking at the transmission of certain diseases borne by vectors, which, is an issue when it comes to health and climate change. With the increase in temperatures, are there, certain vector-borne diseases that are spread in a different way with these changes in temperatures. So in just looking at where do we get information like that, how do we get that mainstream or integrated into our system. We did not just try to, get those cases that were tested, which usually in most countries, you just don't have enough test cases to build a good data set. And so, an example is looking at school absentees when a particular wave of this disease was passing through a certain country. So the absentees was a good proxy, for looking at places that are affected, the entire education system that's affected, and how that country was trying to rebound from that impact. So yeah, we do, spend a lot of time and effort at the very, very beginning, trying to look at our data sources and trying to get, those networks established. So I think that's usually, one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, and if I may just add briefly to that, I think I'm going to just second that response. Like our experience pretty much on not only the implementation of the platforms, like for instance, when we've looked at developing a climate change sharing protocol with MGI across the Caribbean, that was with 5Cs, on work we've done directly with the government of Antigua for their GSDS and SDG data reporting, that was a DA project. One thing consistently I think we've found in pretty much most Caribbean countries, I mean some greater than others, is just the consistency and quality of source data. That's a challenge. And then also the capacity in managing and processing that data into meaningful information. That has shown to be quite a bit of a challenge as well. I mean, we can go and implement this platform in any country really, but if you don't have good source data, it's not exactly that usable. So I think having taking an approach that's like the value chain of data to information to decision making, I think is an important thing to take into consideration. Look at all stages of where you're getting the data from, what's happening with data, the quality of it, how it's processed and transformed into information products, whether it be a map, charts, graphs, whatever, and then how then is it reported to whomever it needs to be reported to, whether it be the UN or national reporting. So taking that approach, I think, is a very important step. Jason, do you have any comments on that one, or?
Thanks to the question, Shane. So I tend to agree with Ava and David here. I just want to say an additional challenge that we had in Antigua is the bandwidth issue. So these are systems that we need internet to access. So, and getting access to reliable internet on island at times can be challenging.
Yes, so I've got one question here. Mahmoud, okay, I'm just going to get to this question first. Votre expérience est épatante aujourd'hui sans système technologique. Rien ne peut avancer. Comment pourriez-vous aider des organisations de la société civile qui se recherchent? So that's a French question, basically meaning great experience. Today, without technological systems, nothing can advance. How are you able to help organizations, civil society organizations, to gain that technological capability is essentially what the question says. I'll answer first in English and then in French. The key is, in my opinion anyway, this is where organizations like the CTCN and other donor organizations, could be the GIZ or whomever, come into place. If you do not have the technological infrastructure and a society with the capability to use it and participate with that or use that infrastructure, then you're right. I don't think much can happen in that regard. So therefore, we have to look at each given country and see what level they're at. Antigua is, in my opinion anyway, from the countries that we worked with, is quite well advanced with respect to the data they're gathering, drone data. The data management unit is very well established and highly professional individuals who are working in it. So we had a good level to start with, whereas there's other situations where that level is not quite there yet. So I think you need to start with that, and perhaps maybe even Heather or Daya, could you comment on CTCN's role in providing technological support or capacity development through the interventions that you facilitate? I'll just briefly respond in French. C'est sûr que c'est pas possible pour avancer avec ces systèmes ou systèmes comme ça dans les pays en développement qui n'ont pas la capacité de développement de technologie. Donc, c'est nécessaire pour observer c'est quoi le niveau de développement de technologie et capacité de la société civile. Donc, on doit observer ou chercher les systèmes pour donner l'argent, la capacité, les technologies comme CTCN. Donc, ça, c'est le rôle, c'est la position de l'organisation comme CTCN pour aider les pays en développement comme ça, comme un DRC ou les autres, et aussi le gouvernement. Donc, c'est ça. Heather, do you have any comments on the CTCN's role of providing technological capacity to either civil society organizations or governments who will support civil society organizations?
Hi, yes, you can hear me again, right?
100%.
Okay. Yeah, as I mentioned in the introduction, a lot of our capacity building is aimed at supporting our technology assistance implementers in either providing training on the ground as part of a technical assistance project, or to governments. It can be anything from supporting a multi-stakeholder process in passing a new regulation or policy, or sending in a team to assess the feasibility of different technology options or prioritizing them. It's kind of limitless. It's whatever the country requests, whatever the country needs. It's all demand driven. And so, yeah, capacity building, it really it runs the gamut. I would say that a large part of a lot of our technical assistance is putting on trainings and making sure that knowledge is sustainably passed on, and we don't just come in and come out really fast and not have any sustainable impact or leaving a good chance for better country ownership. And I'm not being very articulate right now, but
just a quick question.
Yeah.
I think it does. So, Heather, so for the technical assistance, governments request them, but do you have civil society organizations request TAs as well? Like NGOs, for instance?
I think we do.
Okay.
Di, I think I'm gonna need your help.
Yeah, so I think for the TAs, we would need approval from the national designated entities, which is like DOE, where Jason works at. But we allow them to communicate first with the national designated entity, and that way we leverage political driver of the country, and that's how we work together, like all together, including the government and civil society organizations. So they can have a concept and they can approach. I mean, we can also connect them with the NDE of developing countries. So yeah, that's how we will work together.
Okay, great. So I'm going to attempt to respond to take your responses to in French. Oui, c'est possible pour les sociétés non gouvernementales ou sociétés civiles dans les pays qui veut faire quelque chose, qui veut apprendre la technologie. Il y a les autres modèles, autre chose des programmes, par exemple des technologies actuelles, comme software, comme quelque chose de matériel. Et aussi, il y a les opportunités pour faire développement de capacité pour les structures, les législations, les programmes, etc., pour aider avec le développement de capacités technologiquement dans les pays. Mais c'est nécessaire principalement pour parler avec les NDC, le contact NDC, dans 7 pays, RDC, dans le Congo, pour faire une proposition. On veut faire quelque chose. On veut apprendre sur le sujet de télédétection, GIS, pour aider avec adaptation de climat au Congo. faire la proposition à l'NDC, NDI, à CTCN. Et après ça, elle peut parler avec le secrétariat de CTCN pour analyser la proposition. On peut peut-être faire un projet. Donc, l'étape principale, c'est faire un projet, une proposition pour un projet. C'est spécifique ça. Et après ça, parler avec les NDI, avec ton pays. Et après ça, c'est une conversation avec le CTCN. Donc, ben, c'est possible. Et c'est une bonne intervention aussi. Merci. OK. Mahmoud, any progress in translating geospatial remote sensing for SDG indicators? I'm gonna hand that. I'm gonna hand that to Ava. Do you want to respond to that one? Or Jason even?
Well, in terms of trying to find sources of data, yeah, it's been a variety of formats that may be used, or a variety of techniques for trying to get to that data. Of course, the lowest hanging fruit is always the best if the information is already available in some kind of spatial format. That's what we try to go after at first. And then if not, we go through to the next stage of, can we use proxy information to try and represent it? But if there's new collect or new data that has to be created, that's usually a different level of integration. So, but we've done it. So, we've used a lot of remote sensing techniques, whether it's clearinghouses or platforms that already exist that allow us to, grab remote sensing data and then convert that. We've worked with, a variety of suppliers like Planet and so on. We've used different open source tools for trying to derive more information from satellite imagery or remote sensing data sets. So in that way, we've looked at quite a few things, varying from shoreline movements or shoreline dynamics to monitoring mangrove health and looking at the status of mangrove over decades. So yeah, so we are familiar with quite a few of the different platforms and tools that may be out there, as well as we can do the analysis in-house when it comes to remote sensing and trying to derive more data sets from that for use in the systems.
Just brief comment on that one as well. Our experience with the platform has largely been focused on responding to multilateral environmental agreements. And those, of course, as pointed out on one of the slides, there's a fair degree of intersection with the SDGs, but most prominently with the environmental SDGs. So 14, 15, et cetera, and 6 for available water. And what we have, de facto done, like a good example would be 15, like 15.1 to 3, I think, is land degradation. So achieving land degradation neutrality, which is an SDG target. And we have used satellite data for that. We actually showed some of the maps that showed degraded land in Antigua and Barbuda. But also what we tend to do is use a combination. So the UNCCD provides global data sets for all countries that are parties to that convention to report on their progress, relatively coarse resolution. But what can be done with the platform and with the proper capacity, such as that possessed by the team, Jason's team in Antigua and Barbuda, is to combine, coarse resolution data to do, the report, the affected country party report and LDN target setting and so forth, but even add to that, add granularity and more specific analysis using, say, drones or high resolution satellite data, all of which can be managed and combined into the platform. Maybe Jason, do you want to talk a bit about your maybe LDN target setting process with some of the high res data that you used?
Thanks again for the question. So yes, David, it's exactly. I was going to mention that. So one of the maps that were shown in the presentation was for degraded lands. That map was, well, that's in reporting, as David said, so I think it's target 15.3, reporting on the degraded lands within countries. So that data came from a satellite data from a global data set. what we were able to do during the process, the land degradation neutrality target setting process, as David mentioned, was to combine that data with additional data that we sourced from other sources. So the convention provided us with the data, that satellite data. We're able to actually go on Google Earth also and to get access to higher resolution data. And we also have the option of including our own data. So if we have drone imagery or aerial imagery of specific areas, that data can be integrated into the reporting process. So definitely, and also if we look at the biodiversity convention as well, we report on protected areas. So we have the protected areas, the proposed and the declared protected areas mapped out in a GIS file, and that is also used to report to the Convention on Biological Diversity. We report on habitats as well, on species, and this is data that is already mapped. So, and that feeds into the reporting process. So we are making progress in reporting to SDGs using geospatial data. Just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
Thank you, Jason.
So, sorry, David, if I could just address one of the comments from Bruce earlier on in terms of carbon finance. Possible approaches required. Not every government is prepared to undertake, for example, emissions trading. I like that Bruce brought up this point because it's something that we've had experience in as well. There are quite a few indicators that governments are just not able to, deal with, whether it's the data collection or getting stakeholders to participate. But even with that, that obstacle, we have been trying to find ways of still trying to, develop, whether it's proxy indicators or so on, and trying to meet that. A good example of that, has been looking at carbon finance and trading with mangrove as, good points of carbon sequestering, and then trying to offset that with a lot of the private sector and, trying to appeal to their corporate social responsibility. So at least it's a start in, trying to overcome this issue where the private sector now understands that this is something that they could use to their benefit. And at the same time, it's something that could look at, trying to grow that side of carbon financing in that cooperative way. So again, they see the benefit of a system like this in that you're bringing together multiple sectors and you're trying to initiate getting over this burden or obstacle, where a government may not be equipped as well as a developed nation to deal with this kind of finance facility.
Thank you very much, Ava, for that. So we're at 11:54 right now, and I think we had 2 hours allocated for this on the outside. So I don't see any more questions. Does anybody have any more questions? Again, we thank everybody for their time and their participation and their questions. If we can't get to your questions during this session, we can make sure that you have access to our contact information, and feel free to reach out to us directly. I think we'll probably aim to wrap this up. Heather, Dai, do you want to close this off?
Yes, I think you just said the right thing. All the presentations and recordings will be available on our website, and there you will have all the contact information from the MGI and DE. So we thank everyone for your time, and we are very glad to have all the panels. It was very interesting presentation, and we had a very good response from the audience. So yeah, I would like to thank all, and we can, I think, wrap it up.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Jason, Ava, David, and the team at MGI for helping to coordinate. Just thanks again to the UNCTCN for your support on this and hosting us. And thank you all to the participants. We really appreciate your time and your interest in this.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Have a great day.
Merci.